understanding is fiercely different than judgment. Attachment has a way of illuminating some fierce and uncomfortable truth.
Yes. Hey!
Cheers.
Cheers. Not too loud. I'm Michael.
Turns out I'm Michael too.
Yes. The M&Ms.
I'm Michael Leach.
I'm Michael Ashenfelter.
Yeah.
Do you want to go and give your other credentials?
I thought about it, but then I thought that's
Superior
poor taste.
first.
But ladies first. Age before beauty. Oh, I go twice first. Okay, good. So all three. I got all three credentials. Michael Leach. I am a licensed psychologist in the state of Texas.
I'm Michael Ashenfelter, licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas. So we're both therapists.
Yep, both in private practice.
Can we call you a therapist? Is that allowed?
Yeah. Okay. What else would you call me?
Psychologist.
I probably think of myself more as a therapist than a psychologist.
Both in Dallas, DFW, Greater Metroplex. But we are doing a podcast, and we're very excited about it.
Quite.
And there's many parts to this podcast. Nervous about how many parts show up.
Sure. That's going to be part of the fun.
So we are doing a podcast, and the name we tentatively have right now is Attachment for the People. What's that about?
Well, I think the idea was to try and make a complex and vast theory, body of knowledge, more accessible to more people, make it more digestible, usable, applicable beyond our own minds as therapists and beyond our fellow therapist minds.
By no means are we just full-on experts that we know everything about attachment.
That's right.
But we know quite a bit.
And perhaps most importantly, we like learning about it.
Exactly.
And so as we learn, hopefully others will learn.
And I think that's part of the journey I've enjoyed with you along this way of working on attachment is that I have a different history with it. Mm-hmm. You came to know it from a different lens as well. And so being able to, discover, debate, talk about, understand, learn more, think differently about, I think is a lot of fun. That's been a growing edge for me, at least.
Your starting point and your sort of location in attachment theory has definitely challenged me to know what I know and unknow what I thought I knew.
Samesies.
Yeah, expand my understanding, expand the way to think and talk about attachment across different contexts, even if it still sometimes makes my head swirl.
But that's the thing. It really is complex.
Sure.
And I think people talk about it in such simplistic ways. It's very anecdotal, but there's so many nuances to it. It is a robust theory that's been around for a hot minute.
Sure.
But it hasn't really been given its full stage. Yeah.
Longer than I've been alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we're still learning more and more about it.
Not only learning more about it, but also it's a theory that is expanding.
Yes.
And I'm learning about itself, I suppose.
It's also like for the people, it's a hot topic right now.
Sure.
It's a trendy topic in the therapeutic world.
Yeah.
And relational world.
And pop culture.
Yeah. So I think that's part of me. My passion for this is wanting to take back the sacredness of it a bit.
Yeah.
And not make it so kitschy, trendy, but usable, realistic, tangible.
And scientifically grounded.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Mm-hmm. So we are going to do that in a fashion where we're going to have drinks.
Yeah, in an old fashioned, some might say.
Yeah. Today we're starting out with an old fashioned.
Oh,
look at that nice bridge. But yes, one thing we have in common is we both really love to entertain.
Absolutely. And be entertained.
Yes.
As you did to me today, making this fantastic.
And so, because we both, I think it's safe to say we both like the finer things of life. Mm-hmm. When I say finer things, maybe what we can afford, the finer things.
Or not, but...
I like the things. It doesn't mean I always get to experience them.
Sure. I just had a memory, so sort of off topic maybe, or not, maybe at some point. Mm-hmm. But I grew up with my mother telling me I have such rich taste.
Same.
And I had such a conversation with her in my head over this week. And it was an interesting conversation.
Oh, this week?
Yeah.
Even? Oh.
Yeah. Literally, it's just very fresh. revisiting of a memory, and like, what does that all mean, and what was she trying to communicate, and how did I take it in? And,
Yeah. My phrase was, I have champagne taste on a beer budget.
it's very Texan and Southern.
Yes. And was frequently used, I would say.
Frequently.
Yeah. And now I'm embracing it.
Sure.
And thankfully I have a little bit more than a beer budget now. But is that weird to say? That's weird. I don't know.
Well, it's complicated.
It is complicated.
Because it's rooted in, or it's laced with poverty and fear, which is all attachment related.
We're always going to bring it back.
I mean,
That's the goal.
Because it's easy too, because it's right there.
And so, yeah, things we're going to be doing on here, we'll be making a drink for every episode.
Yes, and by we usually mean Michael Ashenfelter, but
That's true, but you're also I've been to your house. You've made many a great drinks.
yeah, but you have the flair.
Thank you. So we'll be doing mixed drinks.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes wine, because we both like wine as well. And relaxing and having this conversation. Something else that just happened that is also going to probably come up is just the relatability of relating our own stories and lives
Yeah,
to this. So hi, Mom and Dad. We'll see.
we'll see. If my mom could figure out how to operate a podcast on her smartphone,
Yeah.
probably be one of my brothers to show her.
One of your smart brothers.
Smarter than me, that's for sure.
Oh, all the dynamics we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But that does lead me into thinking of, I think one thing that when I'm working with my clients is they're fearful of just bashing their parents and when talking about attachment. And that's never really my goal, is to demonize or just attack parents of like, oh, they're the worst. They did everything wrong. Because my understanding going into it is that most parents are just doing the best they can. They're doing what they know. They're doing what they can. And unfortunately, that leads to some attachment woundings and some dynamics that last with us for quite a while. So I usually also tell my clients, go ahead and put a little money as you're saving for college. Just save a little bit more for therapy because your kids are going to need it. Not because you're the worst, but because you're human and relationships are hard, messy.
I think understanding is fiercely different than judgment, but a fierce pursuit of the truth, to borrow from AA as a spiritual path or as a treatment for addiction or character flaws. Attachment has a way of illuminating some fierce and uncomfortable truth.
Yes.
Yet, certainly therapists aren't the only one who embody this, but we have very little use for judgment in that it causes you to not really see or turn away or limits your understanding of things.
Right.
Yeah.
It blocks so much.
But I think there is probably a prototype of a classification, which we're going to get into, of certain attachment classification patterns that are more fearful of bashing, quote unquote, or speaking negatively.
Yeah, we could have just seen my attachment come alive.
I was going to say that, but maybe not. Or the kind of patients that you draw to your practice.
Self-reflecting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Either way, I want to take care of others, to take care of myself.
Yeah.
So I'll protect others
Yeah.
as a way to stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have no problem and find myself often pushing an envelope. I'm not afraid to bash, even though I don't think I am bashing. I'm just not afraid of it
Yeah.
because I know where it's coming from. It's coming from a desire to see it and see it clearly and see it plainly.
Authentically.
I think when anybody studies attachment, they get real self-conscious and it evokes a bit of insecurity, self-doubt. And so I think part of what our hope was is to demystify some of the theory so that you can approach it even further and benefit from it all. Because it's such a powerful, meaningful theory.
Absolutely. How did you come into attachment? How did you learn about it? What's your history with it?
It's been so part of my academic, theoretical, professional life that I'm not positive exactly if this is a true story. But this is what I think the story is.
Okay.
I did all my training in Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles is a bit of a hub of attachment research, in part because
It's a big hub.
It's a big hub, period.
Well, of attachment research.
But certainly of attachment, yeah. And one of those characters in the latter side, not the early development of attachment, but the latter side would be Daniel Siegel. Siegel's a psychiatrist and teaches at UCLA. And I don't know that he was responsible for the conference, but at UCLA was a conference, either yearly or biannual conference on attachment where people from all over the world would come. So doing my doctoral training, all of my college training in Los Angeles meant I was in great proximity to academic, professional lectures. And so I started attending those conferences in my graduate program.
Oh, awesome.
And where Daniel Siegel's Developing Mind was core reading in my doctoral program. And so from there, that led me to the book that he wrote with Mary Hartzell to make attachment for the people more accessible. So he took basically that book, Developing Mind, and went chapter by chapter with Mary Hartzell, who is a early childhood education expert,
Right.
and in learning centers and daycare, preschools. And they basically took Developing Mind chapter by chapter and rewrote it in a way that was accessible, but it was very attachment, what we think about, I think that's discussed in pop culture. And that really solidified my interest in attachment theory. And so from there, that would be the early 2000s.
That's so interesting. We learned about it at the same time.
Yeah.
So in my undergrad.
But in your undergrad in child development.
Yes. Human development, family
Human
studies. Yeah. I had an emphasis on child development. But yeah, same concepts and same study. And so yeah, that was at my undergrad at Texas Tech, which was really heavily drenched in attachment.
Sure.
We had a child learning center on campus and got to observe and score. I say score, I didn't score. Watch people score different interviews and observations with the attachment orientation of Ainsworth's work. Yeah, so that's it. That's fun to know. Like that's when it started for me.
Yeah.
And also that's where I also learned systems theory. And so it was kind of married those two things together, and it really informed the trajectory of my career.
Yeah.
Which then led me most recently to emotionally focused therapy, which has it's really grounded and rooted in attachment theory. And that's with Sue Johnson. And so in her trainings, it's a high emphasis on, before you can practice this model, you have to understand a lot of these tenets to understand how people are relating to one another and why they're relating the way they are. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how, on one hand, we have a very similar route and timing.
Yeah.
But my doctoral program is so not systems oriented.
Yeah.
But was very one-person psychology moving into a two-person psychology at that time, with the relational tilt in psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
So my attachment theory is more connected to analytic thought than any sort of systems, family therapy, couples. And hence some of our roads diverged,
yeah.
Which I think is partly why we think about attachment slightly different, or why we have found ourselves in some different camps within this large umbrella.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure will
Mine being better, which is fine.
Clearly.
All that to say, it's been around a bit, and in the back and in the front of our mind,
Quite.
For many, many years.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting for me, to kind of bridge these different worlds that are very similar, and talk about this in a very real and tangible way. So we won't be talking much about like analytic thought.
Correct.
Or the teaching of. That's one thing I really want. I'm around teaching all day long of it. I say all day long, quite a bit. I'm tired of the teaching of it. I want like the application, the realness, the gossip. I want to spill the tea on it is what I want to do.
You'll be better at the applied piece, probably. Because my natural place is to be in a more academic, distant.
I love how you're saying, to me in my mind, what you're saying is you're trying to walk it back.
To a safer place.
To a safer place. By calling me non-academic.
No, I don't mean that way, but that's funny. I admit how often I'm stumped when somebody asks, well, so how do you apply this? I'm like, what do you mean? You just fold in the cheese.
You just fold in the cheese.
Just do it. So I can imagine that'll be a...
Yeah. Well, and the reality of the fun relationship I think we've had is we will go to conferences together and you will sit in the teaching and in the academic and I will go find the nearest mixology bar and wait for you there to discuss it. That and any other tea that was spilled.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for the tea. Trust me. I can do both. I'm bivocational.
So yes, so this is us.
Yeah.
The Michaels, and we are going to be talking about attachment.
Yeah.
And having some wonderful beverages as we do.
You and I, so we bump into attachment at the same time. Late 90s, early 2000s. But how did we meet in actual life?
How do we meet? Well, we didn't meet. I observed you from afar.
Okay, so I was a caged animal.
Yes. No, I don't know if I ever told you the story. So I was renting space. My wife and I have a practice. We were renting space from a company. And that company was throwing a party.
Okay.
And you walked in and everyone seemed to know you. Life of the party. And I remember you had on a blazer and you had like a lapel pin, but you had it in the button part of like your coat. And I'm like, that's pretty fashionable and cool. I was like, one day I'll be like him, the life of the party, and just be a fashion icon in the midst of the therapeutic world.
Oh my God.
I had all sorts of thoughts when I saw you, but didn't get to actually meet you until a friend of ours, Sean Blackburn, introduced me to do some consultation work with you.
Oh.
And so we were in your uptown office. Yeah. I think that's how we met. I don't know how you met me, but that's how I met you.
I don't remember.
I'm pretty forgettable.
You're so not forgettable. That says a lot more about me.
Yeah.
But that sounds right.
Yeah.
So through the consultation group is how I would have met you.
And back then it was just the three of us. It was you, me, and Sean.
Oh, wow.
In your gorgeous uptown office.
Oh, I miss that place often.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm here in your space. Because it reminds me of it.
Oh, kind words. See, one day I'm trying to be like you still. But yeah, so with all this, we're going to be covering attachment through many different lenses, through relationships, all sorts of different relationships. So siblings, parents,
friendships,
marriages, couplings, maybe even throuplings.
Sure.
Yeah, we can talk about poly.
Why not?
And hopefully also give some pop culture references along the way to make it a little more like one of my favorites right now to compare it to. One thing you should all know is Michael doesn't watch TV. Michael Leach. He says that, but then he'll talk about a show. It's very highbrow of him.
I don't know about highbrow. It's very selective. That's for sure. And very narrow.
Yeah.
And on repeat.
I watch a lot of TV and I feel like I've worked on myself to admit that I can say that I watch a lot of TV around academics and be okay with myself. But my wife and I, we enjoy TV and we enjoy we see things through the attachment lens quite a bit.
Yeah,
One of my favorite ones right now that's most recent is The Bear. So many dynamics going on. So I hope we don't give any spoilers, but I do want to talk about that show at some point.
I think we're going to give plenty of spoilers and we will just alert you to a spoiler alert.
Okay, there we go.
Because I want to be able to talk freely. Because that's an amazing attachment-drenched show.
Drenched. Like it's happening all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Quite. In part because threat is happening all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. Anywho.
Which brings me to threat. And this is something we're going to work out and talk together through. Is I see attachment not as, I kind of get annoyed when people paint it as this pretty theory.
Yeah, sure.
This like drenched in love and just ooey gooey like romance novel, but with parents and kids. That's weird. But the attachment is actually, for me and my experience with working with couples so much, it's dynamic and it's painful. There's a lot of grief that's associated with it. So part of the attachment, in my view, part of the attachment system is really predicated by a rupture. And so a lot of the work in attachment is how do we repair? But a part of the attachment journey is there is going to be rupture. There's going to be separation. There's going to be grief. There's going to be loss, so many things. And so I want to be able to talk about that and take away the rainbows and butterflies. Not that they can't coexist, right? But it's not all rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah, which again may demonstrate some of our mutual attachment disturbances, that we are annoyed by the sappier sort of versions of attachment that gets talked about. But it's also an important and I think truthful correction. And this is where I really appreciate Patricia Crittenden. She's a psychologist, researcher.
I don't know. Okay.
Her sort of, I would describe as a bit of a corrective messaging, particularly to American academic and applied clinical applications of attachment. That attachment is not really about safety as much as it is about risk, threat.
Yes.
And you will hear it conceptualized and written about that way when you leave American journals and when you leave American publications and go to Europe or Latin America in particular, but also in Asia and Africa, where threat is so much more part of recent memory or current life. Whereas in the United States, we are so inoculated from war being on our geographic plane. We have these exceptions of 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, let alone our own internal
battles.
Quite a bit of threat. But in terms of world wars or in terms of wars between countries, our experience is one of tremendous safety, which is an anomaly. Much of the world is much more familiar with threat. And so attachment gets understood under that context, which is more universal, realistic,
right?
And quite frankly, where attachment is birthed from, because it's not an American concept.
What?
I know. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And to your point that we were chatting about earlier, attachment is birthed from an observation of terrible grief, of maternal deprivation, children being deprived of maternal care,
right?
Either from their actual mothers or their families or other caregivers.
Yeah.
And so it's in some ways it's a theory about grief. It's a theory about loss and how to repair from it.
Right. So we won't stop there. We'll also include like how it starts, but then applicably how repair can happen.
Absolutely.
And the accessibility of repair. Yeah. But you can only get to the repair with risk.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
That's such a couples therapist thing to say. You're not wrong.
Cheers.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, one of my mentors would say, no risky, no getty. Yeah, very astute.
And so cute.
Cute, kitschy.
Kitschy.
But yeah, so that's what we're going to do. And I look forward to it. Any parting words before we go on this episode? Are we about to wrap our first episode?
Well, we have another question maybe to put on the table.
Oh, okay.
Why are you so enthralled with the theory? Or why has it grabbed your attention so? Because there's many other theories. There's many other bodies of literature. There's many different camps, particularly in mental health, let alone you go beyond mental health. But something about attachment has grabbed you.
Yeah.
And it hasn't grabbed everyone. So what do you think that is? And
yeah. I appreciate that question. I think one part is that's just what I started with in my undergrad.
Yeah.
So
sure, from your foundations.
Yeah, the foundation of that really.
So you don't know any better.
Is there better? But it's something that grabbed my attention early, and because to me it just makes sense. Even starting my career, I definitely veered off because my graduate work was not attachment oriented.
Yeah.
And so when I started in the field,
not only not
practicing,
attachment oriented, it was not all that attachment.
Are we going to go there? Okay. Is that what we're about to do?
I don't mean to bash anyone's parents. I mean grad school. But I think that's true though. No, I'm just trying to get oriented into reality. is that it was hardly even spoken about.
Oh, yeah, no, it wasn't. In fact, recently I was hosting a training, and a fellow graduate who graduated recently said the only time it was ever mentioned was when I came and did a presentation. Yeah, so through their whole career there. And that again, protect them to protect me. I went to Dallas Theological Seminary, and I think it's a great program. It
produces people like you.
It did not teach attachment. And that wasn't a primary focus. Yeah.
Yeah. I just point that out to say that it's clearly not the only theory. It's clearly not the only body of knowledge out there. But there's something that you couldn't shake.
Yeah. When I practiced some of the things I came out with that were a little bit more CBT oriented, cognitive behavior oriented, and imago therapy, where I feel like I could have people leave my office smiling or agreeing with one another, but they would come back within 3 months and it's the same fight over and over. And my belief is once I was able to kind of go back to my roots of systems and attachment, which really aligned with emotionally focused therapy and the training I got through it postgraduate, the world just made sense. Like there's not really like an academic way for me to say that. Like it just clicked. I'm like mind blown. Like now I know what to do. I know how to work with it. I can see it more clearly. I can see the dynamics, the motivations, the longings, the motivations, the protections that people have. And so I see it through the lens of attachment now. And that lens to me is so clear. And I have a hard time seeing it otherwise. Like sometimes even our consultations, like we wouldn't have arguments, but it would just be like, I can't see that way. Like that, like that doesn't make sense to me.
Yep.
So how about you? Because you've come from a very, well, like even the tradition of the analytic tradition, like attachment came out of that.
Sure.
There was a breakage, or I don't know what to call that, but
I don't know about a break, but
divergence.
A spinoff.
Yes.
That wasn't entirely integrated until much later.
And so being heavily rooted in that, but now you seem to be coming to the good side. So how did that happen?
So you're right. All of my training was quite integratively, analytically oriented, psychodynamic, Freudian. And I was always ambivalent to the theory, even though I chose to go to that program. I went to Rosemead School of Professional Psychology at Biola University in
La
Mirada, California, which is the Bible Institute of Los Angeles.
Which at some point we're going to talk about, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Many times.
How we both went to.
Theologically, evangelical, politically, culturally, theologically conservative.
And here we are today. We'll talk about that later.
I hope we do. And so despite my ambivalence, I did fall in love with a depth psychology. And not just a depth psychology, but a developmental psychology, so that it's a theory that understands who you are always in the context of development of your childhood. And attachment is another developmental theory that suggests that there's something important that happens in childhood that then has a residue or implications for how you are as an adult. And because of my interesting childhood, or as I sometimes playfully tell my patients, no one's going to out-trauma me. Not a competition, but I think I'm winning. Only just to say that I'm familiar with grave attachment disturbances, failures of attachment, and all sorts of forms of abuse. And I've always been curious about how, and interested in how, my childhood is affecting me as an adolescent, as a young adult, an adult, so on. And attachment gave, in some ways, a clearer, simplified framework than what I found to be an overly complicated framework of analytic thought. It could be because I didn't really read my required text. Sorry, Dr. Jones. Reading was hard for me, in my defense. I think I found something that was analytically oriented and spoke the same sort of developmental language of an analysis that was much more accessible in attachment.
Yeah.
And some of that, I think, is because in attachment science, in the body of literature, we're not quite living under the ghost of an ego, of a narcissist in Bowlby, like you are in the narcissist Freud, where people are always trying to claim lineage and fidelity and true analytic thought,
Right.
where you don't quite have that in attachment science. You got plenty of tea. You get plenty of drama.
We got plenty of tea, yeah.
And because we're all humans, and of course it's going to show up there too, but it's differently configured. And so I think that reflects in how inaccessible analytic thought can be if you're not steeped in it. And I was never going to be that steeped in it because I was interested in a bunch of other things. And so I was really drawn to attachment because it made analytic thought much more understandable to me.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why I found it so riveting.
And most recently you've been, and we'll talk about this more later too, but most recently, one way you've really invested in it is through the adult attachment interview, which is one of the many ways to look, understand, study, observe attachment. But there's such a rich base in knowledge found in that. So I'm excited for you to share your knowledge in that as we go along our journey as well. So yeah.
Well, do we hit all the things we wanted to hit?
I think so. Looking at the whiteboard. Yeah. We'll talk about more attachment. Next episode, it's going to be much more the breakdown of what attachment is, the different styles, the different patterns, dynamics, and all that stuff. But this is just who we are, what we're doing. Hopefully give you a little taste. So yeah, Here we go. Attachment for the people. Cheers.
Cheers.
You're finished.
I am.
I'll catch up.
I drink it quick. Or you drink yours slow.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
delicious.
Signing off. Bye.